Distinguished colleagues, the 14th meeting of the Disarmament International Security Committee of the 78th session of the General Assembly is called to order. Distinguished delegates, in accordance with its program of work, the committee will first hear a briefing by the President of the 9th Review Conference on the Biological Weapons Convention, Ambassador Leonardo Bencini of Italy. I extend warm welcome to Ambassador Bencini, who joins me here on this podium. After Ambassador Bencini's presentation, the committee will change to an informal mode to afford delegations the opportunity to ask questions. Immediately thereafter, the formal plenary will resume to allow the committee to continue its thematic discussions on the cluster of nuclear weapons. The committee will now hear a briefing by the President of the 9th Review Conference on the Biological Weapons Convention. You have the floor, Ambassador.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. I warmly thank you for this invitation to address the first committee in my capacity as President of the 9th Review Conference of the Biological Weapons Convention. The conference took place at the end of 2022 against the backdrop of an international context that could have hardly been more challenging. While the deadlock on several disarmament and non-proliferation negotiations, including on biological weapons, dates back many years and is rooted in long-standing cleavages, the war in Ukraine had further exacerbated divisions. As such, in mid-2022, the prospects for an agreement at the BWC Review Conference did not look promising. In August 2022, the conclusion, without a consensual final document, of the 10th Review Conference of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty added to the general sense of pessimism. Time was also an issue. Because of the backlog of events and activities due to the pandemic, 2022 turned out to be quite a congested year in the disarmament calendar. It was not easy for delegations to focus on preparations for the BWC Review Conference, with all the other engagements getting in the way. However, from the very beginning, we tried to turn this limitation into an opportunity. We noticed that, especially when it came to proposals that had been on the table for quite some time, having more time to discuss them did not necessarily bring progress, with some debates, in fact, going around in circles inconclusively. If time was a scarce resource, then we had to make the best use of it, exercise maximum self-discipline, and focus on what really mattered to reach consensus. Another top priority for us was facilitating cross-regional dialogue. We believed that the review conference only stood a chance if delegations, while listening to one another, looked beyond some of the usual divides between regional groupings. Inclusiveness was also important. Every delegation had to feel part of the process. We thus engaged with regional groups as a whole and with their respective coordinators, while at the same time meeting bilaterally with every delegation that wished to participate actively in the review conference. In the run-up to the conference, the Implementation Support Unit, with the financial backing of the European Union, organized four regional seminars actually, respectively in Bangkok, Panama, Vienna, and Addis Ababa. All these preparatory consultations bore fruits, as we were able to identify some large areas of convergence at an early stage that we later narrowed down to specific proposals. Among various factors, the evolution of the position of important countries on certain key issues enhanced our chances for consensual solutions. Drawing from the wider context, one of the points I regularly made with delegations was our responsibility as states parties, but also the moral and professional duty of us individual delegates to deliver this time round. We could not afford another stalemate now after a pandemic that had clearly shown how vulnerable we all were to new pathogens and how necessary international cooperation was to respond to these health threats. We had the opportunity to evaluate the areas of convergence during an informal retreat that we convened in Montreux less than 2 weeks before the start of the review conference. The discussions were so open and constructive that one delegate talked about the spirit of Montreux. I would informally refer to that spirit more than once during the negotiations at the review conference. The retreat really generated positive momentum, and we knew that it was important to sustain this momentum not only at the beginning but throughout the entire conference. This is what we decided to call a positive bias. We knew that having a good team supporting the president of the review conference could make the difference, so we invested quite some time and effort identifying the right candidates for office holders, especially in relation to the chairs of the committees and facilitators on specific issues. With some patience, by the start of the review conference, we had assembled a geographically well-balanced, cohesive team of young, competent, and committed diplomats. It was also the most gender-balanced bureau in the history of the BWC. The chairs of the Committee of the Whole and the Drafting Committee were women, as were half of the facilitators. I am convinced that this well-balanced and competent team reassured delegates and contributed in no small part to the success of the review conference. When we started the conference on 28 November 2022, we were confident that the preparations we had made would help us get off to a good start, and so they did. We managed somehow to insulate the proceedings from the fallout from the discussion of current events, while at the same time allowing delegations to take the floor on any topic they deemed relevant to the review conference. The conference accepted the President's proposal that the Committee of the Whole would focus on the solemn declaration and the article-by-article review. The conference also accepted the President's proposal that the Drafting Committee discuss the forward-looking part, decisions and recommendations, but only in informal meetings of the plenary presided by the chair of the Drafting Committee. This clear definition of the respective tasks of these two committees helped bring some order, predictability, and transparency to the work of the review conference, while at the same time taking some pressure off the formal plenary in the first 2 weeks. The two committees managed to complete their respective work within this time frame, passing on to the plenary the texts issued from their debates. This timeline allowed us to devote the remaining 3 or 4 days to the negotiation of one single text. However, after numerous attempts at reconciling conflicting positions on the review of Articles 5 and 6, we decided to drop the entire solemn declaration and the article-by-article review. In a way, we had to sacrifice this part to allow the forward-looking section of the document to go ahead. Agreeing on the decisions and recommendations was not an easy task either. On this part, too, the need for consensus meant we had to backtrack partially on the progress reached thanks to the tireless work of the facilitators and the proactive engagement of several delegations. The group of the non-aligned movement and other states in particular had managed to find significant common ground on the key questions around international cooperation and assistance under Article 10 of the Convention. A large degree of convergence was also evident on a mechanism to review developments in science and technology. Meaningfully, compliance and verification were also areas where progress proved possible. Even though broader and truly historic agreement might have been within reach, what we finally achieved was generally seen as a success. In a statement released in New York a few hours later, the Secretary General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres, welcomed the adoption of the final document of the 9th Review Conference and considered it a glimmer of hope in an overall bleak international security environment. The help we received from the Secretariat was also instrumental in achieving a positive outcome, from the active involvement of Undersecretary General Nakamitsu at the opening and on the final 2 days of the conference, to the extremely competent and very effective assistance that the Implementation Support Unit provided to the Bureau and the entire membership before and during the review conference. We believe we achieved the main following three goals. We broke the deadlock that had prevented any progress in the implementation of the Convention for more than 20 years. We agreed on a clear roadmap for the entire 4-year review cycle, leaving open the possibility of an early harvest in 2025. We established a working group tasked with identifying, examining, and developing measures to strengthen the Convention and improve its implementation. No issue would be off the table at this working group, including compliance and verification, the question at the heart of the previous deadlock, and the possibility of legally binding measures. Finally, we made progress on the institutionalization of the Convention by agreeing to develop two mechanisms, one on international cooperation and assistance under Article 10, and the other to review technological and scientific developments. Another perhaps minor but significant achievement was the strengthening of the Implementation Support Unit with one additional staff position. As we started debating the various issues within the working group in Geneva, I am sure that the lessons learned in the run-up to and during the review conference will continue to prove useful. I thank you, Chair.
I thank the President of the 9th Review Conference on the Biological Weapons Convention for his statement. In keeping with established practice of the committee, I will now suspend the meeting to afford delegations the opportunity to have an interactive discussions on the briefings we just heard throughout an informal question and answer sessions. As previously, I intend to collect 3 or 4 questions from the committee members, and then I will ask the President to respond to them. The meeting is suspended.